Ethan Calloway had always prided himself on his ability to read people. It was a necessary skill in his line of work as a criminal defense attorney, where the truth was often obscured by layers of deception. But in his own marriage, he had been blind. It started with a text message, a single, innocuous-sounding notification that flashed across Olivia's phone late one night. She had been in the shower, and he had been lying in bed, half asleep, when the screen lit up. Can't stop thinking. About last night. At first, he told himself it was nothing, a misunderstanding. But when Olivia came out of the bathroom and snatched the phone off the nightstand with a flicker of panic in her eyes, something in his gut twisted. He stayed silent, but the doubt had already taken root. Days passed, then weeks. Ethan became a man obsessed. He watched Olivia more closely, noted the way she suddenly became protective of her phone, the extra care she took in her appearance when she left for work. He told himself he was being paranoid, until he wasn't. The evidence piled up like a case file in his mind. Unexplained late nights at the office, a hushed phone call he overheard in the kitchen, the lingering scent of unfamiliar cologne on her scarf. Finally, he confronted her. "Who is he?" Ethan's voice was low, even, honed from years of cross-examinations. Olivia hesitated, her eyes flickering between guilt and defiance. "Ethan, don't do this." "Don't do what? Ask my wife why another man is texting her in the middle of the night?" Silence. Then, with a sigh that sounded more weary than regretful, she sank into the couch. "It's not what you think." "Then, tell me what it is." She didn't. Instead, Olivia's reluctance to confess forced Ethan into a different role. Detective. He pulled phone records, checked financial statements, followed patterns. The truth, when it came, was worse than he expected. It wasn't just an affair. It was betrayal on a level that left him breathless. Olivia had been seeing someone for months. Not a stranger, not a colleague. It was his closest friend and law partner, Damian Carter. Ethan's world fractured. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, existential. He confronted Damian next, cornering him in their office. After hours, "Tell me it isn't true." Damian's jaw tightened. "Ethan, don't say my name. Just tell me man to man, was it all a lie?" For a long moment, Damian said nothing. Then finally, "It wasn't supposed to happen." The admission landed like a punch to Ethan's gut. He could feel his world recalibrating in real time, the life he thought he had now revealed as an illusion. The choices before him blurred into a haze of anger and heartbreak. Olivia begged for a chance to explain, but the words felt empty. Damian, the man he had trusted with his career and his secrets, had stolen something he could never get back. Revenge would be easy. A quiet tip to the firm's board could dismantle Damian's career. A calculated divorce strategy could leave Olivia with nothing. But as the days passed, Ethan wrestled with something deeper. Was revenge worth it? Or was it just another way of letting them dictate his life? A part of him wanted to leave it all behind, to disappear into the quiet life he had once imagined for himself, before law school, before Olivia, before betrayal had become a reality. Another part wanted to fight, to reclaim something of himself, in the wreckage. In the end, Ethan chose neither immediate revenge nor blind forgiveness. He simply walked away. From Olivia. From Damian. From the life that no longer felt like his own. The story didn't have a clean ending. It rarely did. But as he stood on the threshold of an uncertain future, Ethan understood one thing. The past no longer held him captive. The rest would have to be enough. Ethan didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay. He packed a single suitcase, just enough to get by for a few weeks. and checked into a quiet hotel on the outskirts of town. The air smelled different there, less of betrayal and old memories, more of damp pavement and something resembling possibility. For days, he barely moved. He existed in a haze of exhaustion, replaying every conversation, every moment leading up to that text message. How long had he been blind? How long had Olivia and Damien been laughing behind his back? Then, on the fourth day, his phone rang. Olivia. He let it go to voicemail. The second call came an hour later. This time, he answered. "Ethan, please." Her voice cracked. "We need to talk." He closed his eyes. There's nothing left to say. But Olivia wasn't ready to let go. "You don't understand. There's more to this than you think." A bitter laugh escaped him. "I think I understand perfectly." "No," she said, voice dropping to a whisper. "Damien, he isn't who you think he is. She stopped. The line went silent except for her breathing. Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. "Olivia, what are you talking about?" "He's dangerous." Her voice wavered. "I was going to tell you. I made a mistake, Ethan. A terrible mistake." A cold weight settled in his gut. He had prepared himself for pain, for anger, for loss. But fear? That was something new. "What did you do, Olivia?" he asked. The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone, his pulse hammering. He tried calling Olivia back, but it went straight to voicemail. A deep unease settled in his chest. She had sounded terrified. He stood up, pacing the length of the hotel room, his mind racing. He had spent weeks focused on his own pain, his own betrayal. But what if there was more to this than just an affair? Damien.Ethan had known the man for years, trusted him with cases, with strategy, with his life. Had he been so consumed by Olivia's betrayal that he had missed something even more dangerous? He grabbed his keys and headed out. He needed answers. Olivia's apartment was dark when he arrived. She had moved out of their home a week ago, claiming she needed space. Now, standing in front of her door, he hesitated. Then he knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. "Olivia, open up!" Still no answer. He reached for the doorknob, expecting it to be locked. Instead, it turned easily, the door creaking, open. A chill ran down his spine. Inside, the apartment was a mess. Papers scattered, drawers yanked open. A lamp lay shattered on the floor. The place had been ransacked. "Olivia?" His voice was hoarse. No response. He stepped further inside, scanning the room. That's when he saw it. The phone, Olivia's phone, lying on the kitchen counter. The screen was cracked, a single message still visible. "Meet me. Don't tell Ethan." And beneath it, an address. Ethan exhaled sharply. The text wasn't from Olivia. It was from Damien. And suddenly, the betrayal didn't seem like the worst thing anymore. Ethan's hands clenched into fists as he stared at the message. "Meet me. Don't tell Ethan." The address listed was on the outskirts of town, near the old industrial district, an area he knew Damien had once represented clients in. Shady real. Estate developers who made problems disappear. But why would Olivia go there? And why would she warn him about Damien being dangerous? A cold, sinking feeling settled in his stomach. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than just an affair. Ethan grabbed Olivia's phone and left the apartment, his mind working through possibilities. Had she been trying to break things off with Damien? Had she discovered something about him that made her afraid? By the time he reached his car, he had already made up his mind. He was going to that address. The drive felt endless, every red light stretching his nerves tighter. He gripped the wheel, his thoughts spiraling. He had been so focused on the betrayal, on the personal wound of losing his wife to his best friend, that he hadn't stopped to consider why. Why Olivia? Why now? And why would she suddenly claim Damien was dangerous? He pulled off the main road and onto a gravel path that led to an abandoned warehouse. The building loomed in the dark, its windows shattered, metal doors rusted. Ethan killed the engine and stepped out cautiously. The air smelled of oil and damp concrete. His breath came slow and steady, his instincts kicking in. Then he heard it. Muffled sound like someone struggling. Ethan's pulse spiked. He moved quickly, creeping along the side of the building. A faint glow seeped through a broken window. Carefully, he peered inside. Olivia was there. She was sitting in a chair, her wrists bound, her expression twisted in fear. Standing over her was Damien, his back turned to Ethan, speaking low, his voice sharp. Ethan's stomach twisted in rage. This wasn't some tragic love affair. This was something else. Something calculated. He didn't wait. Ethan stepped back, took a breath, and then kicked the door open. "Step away from her, Damien." Damien turned, surprised. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Well," he said, his tone almost amused. "You were always the smart one." Ethan didn't reply. His focus was on Olivia, whose tear-streaked face was filled with something between relief and terror. "What the hell is this?" Ethan demanded. Damien sighed, shaking his head. "This?" He gestured to Olivia. "This is what happens when people don't know when to leave things alone." Ethan took a slow step forward. "Untie her, now!" Damien chuckled. "And then what, Ethan? You call the cops? Think about it. Really think about it. You don't know the half of what's happening here." Ethan's jaw clenched. He needed to play this smart. Damien was right. There was more at play. Olivia had tried to warn him, and now she was tied to a chair in a warehouse, which meant Damien wasn't just a cheating bastard. He was a threat, and Ethan had just walked into the middle of it. Ethan kept his stance firm, his mind racing through his options. Damien was dangerous. He saw that now. This wasn't just about the affair. Olivia hadn't been lying when she said Damien wasn't who he thought he was. "Let her go," Ethan said, his voice controlled but laced with barely restrained fury. Damien tilted his head, a smirk playing at his lips. "You still think you're in control here?" Ethan glanced at Olivia, who was trembling but alert. Her eyes met his, silently pleading. He needed to get her out of here. He shifted slightly, his hands balling into fists. "What do you want?" "Damien, you already took my wife, my trust. What else is left?" Damien exhaled, shaking his head. "Ethan, you're missing the big picture. This isn't about you. Olivia got involved in something she shouldn't have." Olivia flinched. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know what you were doing." "What is she talking about?" Ethan demanded, his pulse spiking. Damien sighed, his face hardening. "You really want to know? Fine. You always were a man who needed the truth." He took a step forward, keeping his eyes locked on Ethan. "I've been moving money, Ethan. The firm was never just about law. It was about influence, power. You think those real estate clients just wanted legal advice? No. They wanted someone who could clean their messes." His voice lowered. "And I did. I laundered their money, moved it through shell companies, kept them out of prison, and I made a lot of people very rich in the process." Ethan felt a chill crawl down his spine. His firm, their firm. He had worked cases, built reputations, fought for clients. Had all of it been a lie? "You son of a bitch," Ethan muttered. Damien gave a half smile. "Oh, don't look so betrayed. You were always the honest one, Ethan. You played the clean game. That's why I kept you in the dark." Ethan clenched his jaw. "And Olivia?" Damien's expression darkened. "She got curious." He glanced at her, then back at Ethan. "She started digging, found records she shouldn't have, asked questions. And when she realized what was happening, she panicked." He shook his head. "I thought I could keep her quiet, but she didn't listen." Ethan's stomach twisted. "You used her." Olivia's voice broke. "He threatened me, Ethan. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle over him. This wasn't just betrayal, it was manipulation. Olivia had been caught in something far more dangerous than an affair. And now Damien had them both backed into a corner. Ethan's mind worked fast. Damien thought he had control, but he had made one mistake. He had underestimated him. Ethan took a slow step forward. "You've already lost, Damien." Damien arched a brow. "How do you figure?" Ethan pulled Olivia's cracked phone from his pocket and turned the screen toward him. The voice recording app was open, the timer still. Running. Damien's smirk vanished. Ethan's voice was ice. "Confession's a bitch, isn't it?" For the first time, Damien looked rattled. Ethan moved quickly. He grabbed a metal rod from the ground and swung, forcing Damien back. Olivia yelped as Damien stumbled, cursing. Ethan wasted no time. He lunged forward, grabbing Olivia's chair and yanking it away. "Run!" he shouted as he untied her hands. She bolted for the door just as Damien recovered, his face twisted with rage. "You think this is over?" Ethan didn't hesitate. He slammed his fist into Damien's jaw, sending him sprawling. Then he turned and sprinted after Olivia, the two of them bursting out into the night. Ethan's car was only a few feet away. He yanked open the door, Olivia diving into the passenger seat as he started the engine. Behind them, Damien staggered out of the warehouse, his silhouette framed by flickering lights. Ethan gritted his teeth and floored the gas. As they sped away, Olivia's breath came in ragged gasps. "Ethan, what do we do?" He kept his eyes on the road, his mind already racing ahead. "We end this." Damien had power, connections, money. But Ethan had something stronger now, the truth. And he was going to make sure Damien paid for every lie, every threat, and every betrayal. Chapter 12. No Way Back. The silence in the car was thick with everything unspoken. Olivia trembled in the passenger seat, her fingers gripping the edge of her seat as Ethan drove, his knuckles white against the wheel. The city lights blurred past. As he sped down the highway, heart pounding, mind calculating. Damien was dangerous, but now Ethan had leverage. The recording, the confession, proof that Damien wasn't just a liar and a cheat, but a criminal. Still, that didn't mean they were safe. Not yet. "Where do we go?" Olivia's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Ethan exhaled sharply. His first instinct was the police, but Damien had spent years greasing palms, making sure people owed him favors. If they went to the wrong person, they could end up dead before the sun rose. "I have someone I can call," Ethan said finally. "A journalist, investigative. One of the few I trust." Olivia turned to him, eyes wide. "You're going public?" Ethan nodded. "Damien thrives in the shadows. We drag him into the light, he loses everything." Olivia swallowed hard, staring out the window. "He won't let that happen without a fight." Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel. "Let him try." 30 minutes later, they pulled into an underground parking garage. Ethan checked the rearview mirror for the 10th time. No sign of Damien's car. That didn't mean he wasn't coming. Ethan led Olivia toward a service elevator, punching in a code. The door slid open and they stepped inside. "Who is this journalist?" Olivia asked, rubbing her arms as if trying to shake off a chill. "Daniel Carter," Ethan said. "He's been after Damien's firm for years, never had enough to take. Him down. Until now." The elevator stopped, and they stepped out onto the 10th floor of a quiet office building. Carter's office was tucked away in a corner, blinds drawn. Ethan knocked twice. A moment later, the door opened. Daniel Carter was in his 40s, sharp-eyed, dressed in a wrinkled button-up, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. His gaze flicked between them before he stepped aside. "You look like hell," Carter said. Ethan smirked despite himself. "Feels worse." Carter shut the door behind them. "Tell me you've got something." Ethan pulled out Olivia's phone, setting it on the table. A recorded confession. Carter's expression shifted, interest turning to something sharper. He reached for his laptop. "Let's hear it," Ethan hit play. Damien's voice filled the room. I laundered their money, moved it through shell companies, kept them out of prison. Carter's eyes darkened. He let the recording play to the end, then exhaled a slow breath. This is big, he muttered, but Damien won't go down quietly. I know, Ethan said. That's why we need to move fast. Carter looked at Olivia. Are you ready for this? Once I run the story, you won't be able to hide. Olivia's lips parted, hesitation flickering in her eyes. I don't know. Ethan stepped closer, his voice softer now. Olivia, this is our chance to stop him. He won't stop unless we fight back. She closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded. Okay. Carter leaned back in his chair. I'll put my best people on this. But if Damien's half as connected as you say, he'll come for you before the story even hits. Ethan already knew that, and he was ready. Chapter 13. A Line in the Sand. They checked into a different hotel under a fake name, but Ethan knew it wouldn't keep them hidden for long. That night, he sat at the edge of the bed, staring at his phone. Then it rang. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A pause. Then Damien's voice. Low. Controlled. Brave move, Ethan. Ethan's. Fingers curled around the phone. It's over, Damien. I have your confession. Damien chuckled softly. Do you really think I didn't plan for this? A beat of silence. Then Damien said something that made Ethan's blood run cold. I suggest you check your email. The line went dead. Ethan's stomach twisted. He grabbed his laptop, heart hammering as he opened his inbox. A new email. No subject, no sender name. He clicked. An image filled the screen. It was a surveillance photo. Grainy, but unmistakable. Olivia, taken from a distance, walking out of Carter's office, then another. Ethan himself, getting out of his car. And one more. A man Ethan didn't recognize, standing across the street, watching them. A message appeared at the bottom of the email. You forced my hand. Now it's my turn. Ethan's breath came, slow and steady. His pulse was anything but. Olivia looked over his shoulder and gasped. Oh my God. Ethan closed the laptop. His jaw tightened. This wasn't just about exposing Damien anymore. It was war, and Ethan wasn't going to lose. Chapter 14. The breaking point, Ethan stared at the email, his mind racing. Damien was making his move. The surveillance photos weren't just a threat, they were a declaration. He knew exactly where they were, and he wasn't going to sit back and let them destroy him. Ethan shut the laptop and turned to Olivia. We need to go. Now. Olivia's breathing was shallow, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the bed. Where? He knows where we are. Ethan exhaled sharply. We don't run. We get ahead of him. He grabbed his phone and dialed. Carter, the journalist answered immediately. Ethan? He knows, Ethan said. He sent me pictures. He's been watching us. A heavy pause. Then Carter's voice, lower, urgent. Get out of that hotel, now! Ethan was already moving, grabbing Olivia's coat and pulling her toward the door. How soon can you publish? Tomorrow morning, Carter said. I'll send it to my editor tonight. Once it's live, Damien's finished. Ethan swallowed. That's too long. He's going to make a move before then. I'll push for an early release, Carter promised. Get somewhere safe. I'll call. When it's live. Ethan hung up and turned to Olivia. We need to be unpredictable. Olivia nodded, though she still looked shaken. Okay. They slipped out of the hotel through the back entrance, Ethan keeping an eye on the street. No sign of Damien's men, yet. But he knew they were coming. They took a cab, switching cars twice, then finally pulled into an old motel off the highway. Cheap, quiet, untraceable. Ethan paid in cash, then locked the door behind them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of everything pressed down on them. Olivia sat on the bed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he'll hurt us?" Ethan hesitated. "He won't get the chance." He placed the laptop on the table, checking the email again. He zoomed in on the last photo, the man watching them. He didn't recognize him. A hired enforcer? Someone Damien trusted to clean up his messes? Ethan clenched his jaw. Damien had always played the long game. He wasn't going to send empty threats, and Ethan wasn't going to wait for him to strike first. He opened his laptop again and started typing. "What are you doing?" Olivia asked. Ethan's voice was cold. "Setting a trap." Chapter 15. The last move. It was almost midnight when Ethan's phone buzzed. A single text from Carter. "Story is live." Ethan clicked the link. Damien's face filled the screen. The headline was brutal. "Elite lawyer tied to money laundering scheme. Exclusive investigation." The article was damning. Carter had woven together every thread. Damien's connections to criminal enterprises, the missing money, the fraudulent real estate deals, and of course, the recorded confession. Ethan exhaled. It was done. Then another message came through, not from Carter, from Damien. "You think this ends with an article?" Ethan's muscles tensed. Then another text. "An address. Meet me. No cops. Or Olivia pays the price." Ethan's blood ran cold. Olivia, who had been reading over his shoulder, gasped. "No, he wouldn't." Ethan's stomach twisted. Damien had lost everything in the span of a few hours. He was backed into a corner. A desperate man did desperate things. Ethan met her eyes. "I have to go." She grabbed his arm. "No, it's a trap." "I know," he said, voice steady. "But I'm ending this tonight." Chapter 16. The Reckoning. The address led to a warehouse. On the outskirts of town, Ethan parked a block away and approached on foot. The night air was thick, the streets eerily silent. He slipped inside, his pulse steady but alert. Damien stood in the center of the empty space, hands in his pockets, a thin smile on his face. "You actually came." Ethan kept his distance. "Where? Is she?" Damien chuckled. "Relax. Olivia's safe, for now." Ethan's fists clenched. "You lost, Damien. The story's out. It's over." Damien exhaled slowly. "Over? No. You've only set things in motion." He took a step closer. "You think I don't have people who can make this disappear? That I don't have leverage?" Ethan didn't move. "Your name is everywhere. Every client you've worked with is cutting ties. You're toxic, untouchable. No one will save you." Damien's eyes darkened. "You really don't understand how the world works, do you?" A shadow moved behind him. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He spun just as a figure lunged, a man with a gun. Ethan reacted fast. He grabbed a metal pipe from the floor and swung. The gunman stumbled back, but Damien was already moving, reaching for his own weapon. A gunshot rang out. Ethan dropped to the ground, heart hammering. But Damien wasn't aiming at him. Damien's body jerked, eyes wide. A red stain spread across his chest. He staggered, gasping. Behind him, Olivia, holding a gun, hands shaking. Damien collapsed to his knees, his mouth moving but no words coming. His eyes locked onto Olivia. Betrayal, shock, and something else. Then he fell. Silence. Olivia stood frozen, the gun slipping from her fingers. Her breath came in short gasps. Epilogue. The unfinished chapter days passed. Then weeks. The world kept moving. Headlines changed. The scandal that had once consumed their lives became yesterday's news, buried under fresh controversies. But for Ethan and Olivia, the weight of what had happened lingered, heavy and inescapable. They still lived in the same apartment, but it no longer felt like home. Conversations were brief, interactions careful, as if they were both waiting for the other to break the silence that had settled between them. One evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table staring at his untouched glass of whiskey. Olivia stood in the doorway watching him. She had done that a lot lately, watching as if trying to read him. Finally, she spoke. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Ethan didn't look up. "All the time." A pause. "But you're still here?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He exhaled, rubbing his hands together. "So are you." She stepped into the room, hesitant. "Because I don't want this to end like this." Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her. She had lost weight. Her eyes, once so full of fire, now carried something else. Something raw, something that hadn't been there before Damien, before the betrayal, before the gunshot that ended it all. He didn't know what to say. He had spent weeks trying to understand his own emotions, to separate anger from sorrow, love from resentment. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. Olivia swallowed. "I don't either, but I want to try." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't know if I can forgive you." Her breath hitched, but she nodded as if she had expected that. "I understand." Silence. Then Olivia stepped closer, just within reach, but not touching him. "If you tell me to leave, I will." Ethan closed his eyes. The logical part of him told him this was the moment to end it, to walk away and start over. But another part, the one that still remembered the good years before everything fell apart, hesitated. When he opened his eyes, Olivia was still waiting. He didn't tell her to leave, but he didn't tell her to stay either. And for now, that was enough. End epilogue. A wound that won't heal. The days stretched on, neither healing nor breaking completely. Ethan and Olivia existed in a strange limbo, neither together nor apart, bound by something neither of them could define anymore. Ethan had taken to long walks at night, the city's cold air offering a kind of clarity he couldn't find in their apartment. Olivia often stayed in, reading or pretending to, her gaze always unfocused. She wasn't sleeping well, neither of them were. One night. As Ethan sat alone in the living room, Olivia appeared in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. "Are we just going to pretend this is normal?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "What do you want me to say, Olivia?" Her voice cracked. "Something. Anything." Ethan looked at her. She was standing barefoot, wearing an old sweater of his she hadn't worn in years. For a moment, she looked like the woman he had married, before secrets and lies turned them into strangers. "I don't know how to be with you," he admitted. She swallowed hard. "Then do you want me to go?" Ethan opened his mouth, but the answer wouldn't come. She waited. Then, finally, she nodded, as if understanding something unspoken. "I'll go stay with my sister." He didn't stop her. The next morning, she was gone. 6 months later, Ethan hadn't seen Olivia since she left. He told himself it was for the best, and maybe it was. But some nights, when he closed his eyes, he still saw her. One evening, while walking home from work, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice. "Ethan?" He stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. "Olivia," a pause. I just wanted to hear your voice." Ethan closed his eyes. The weight in his chest hadn't disappeared. Neither had the anger, or the love. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I miss you." Ethan exhaled. "I miss you too." Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then, softly, Olivia asked, "Do you think there's a way back?" Ethan looked at the city lights, stretching far beyond him. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But maybe." Another silence. Then Olivia whispered, "Maybe is enough." And for the first time in months, Ethan wasn't sure. If he wanted to hang up, the end. 1 year later, Ethan had told himself that time would dull the edges of what had happened, but some wounds never fully heal. They just settle into the body like old scars, reminders of what once was. He hadn't spoken to Olivia in months. That phone call had been their last. There had been no dramatic reunion, no final fight, no grand conclusion, just the slow, aching distance that stretched between them until silence became the only thing left. But today, as he sat in a cafe downtown, stirring a cup of black coffee he didn't particularly want, something in the air shifted. A familiar voice. "Ethan?" His breath caught before he even turned. There she was, Olivia. She looked different. Her hair was a little shorter, her face a little thinner, but her eyes, they were the same, filled with something unreadable. He hadn't expected this moment. Not here. Not like this. Olivia. She hesitated before sitting across from him, setting her purse down carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile thing between them. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 1,000 unsaid things pressing down on them. Then she spoke. "I'm moving." Ethan felt something shift inside him. "Where?" "Seattle. I got a job offer, a fresh start." He nodded slowly. "That's good. You deserve that." A sad smile flickered across her face. "I don't know if I deserve anything." Silence. Then, hesitantly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table. "I wrote you something," she said softly. "Something I should have said a long time ago." Ethan stared at it, then at her. "Why now?" Olivia inhaled sharply, as if steadying herself. "Because if I don't say it now, I never will." His fingers hovered over the envelope. "Are you asking me to read it?" She shook her head. "Not now. Later. When you're ready." Something about the finality in her voice made his chest tighten. For a moment, he considered asking her to stay, to tell her that maybe there was still something left to salvage. But the truth was, he didn't know if there was. So instead, he did the only thing he could. He reached for the envelope. Their eyes met, holding for just a little longer than they should have. Then Olivia stood, gave him one last, bittersweet smile, and walked away. Ethan didn't stop her. This time he knew it was for good. Later that night, he opened the letter. The words were simple, honest. "I loved you, I hurt you, and I will never forgive myself for that. I don't know if we were meant to last forever, but I do know that what we had was real. And despite everything, I will always be grateful for that. I hope one day you find the happiness we lost. Goodbye." "Ethan." He folded the letter carefully, staring at the words for a long time. Then, with a quiet exhale, he set it down. And for the first time in a long time, he let go. The end.